This is the Backbone One, a mobile gaming controller that snaps onto your phone and turns it into a handheld gaming device. It works across Android and iOS devices, but this particular version has been created in collaboration with Sony to give you a nice PlayStation 5 vibe when you're gaming on your phone. I've been using it for the past 3 months or so, and it's actually helped me put a dent into my back catalogue, but there are also some things that I really don't like about the Backbone One. So let's get into it. Despite the PlayStation branding, this version is compatible with any game that you can play on your mobile device, which supports a controller. Of course, the only games that are going to play natively on your phone are the ones you buy through Apple Arcade or the Google Play Store. If you do have a PlayStation, you'll be able to stream games through the Remote Play app, and you'll also be able to access Game Pass Ultimate and Steam Link if you want to stream games from there. You're responsible for buying your own games or subscriptions through those services, but Backbone does sweeten the deal by giving you access to some good free trials when you pick up a controller. Unfortunately, for all other versions apart from the PlayStation One, you get access to a Game Pass free trial. I'm assuming that this is part of the licensing deal with Sony, but it does leave a bad taste in your mouth if you're paying for the same product and you're just not getting access to one of the benefits. That means it better be a good design, right? So let's take a closer look at the controller itself. It is definitely impressive just how much this Backbone One controller resembles the PlayStation DualSense. They've been colour matched to perfection as far as I can tell, and even the buttons have been made in that transparent design style which looks straight off a Sony controller. The aesthetics alone really do lift that experience when you are playing a PlayStation game on your phone. But mechanically speaking, the DualSense is obviously way out of the Backbone One's league. The buttons themselves feel good, but they're going to be a very different experience to the PlayStation. They're a little bit more clicky, and of course when you get to that D-pad, you're not getting the hole punched out for each of the directional buttons. It also doesn't feel quite as hefty when you're dealing with the analog sticks, so you will have to kind of recalibrate yourself when you're playing a game through this. The triggers obviously can't hold a candle to those on the DualSense with those adaptive triggers, so you're going to have to make do with fairly clicky ones up there too. All in all, it's still a really comfortable controller to use, and it definitely doesn't feel any worse than, say, something like a Joy-Con. And simply being able to put your phone into this form factor can be really liberating. Being a parent, I really have to choose my moments when I can play video games, and being able to play my PlayStation through Remote Play in a handheld mode is the only way that I can get some games done. Portability, even just around my home, is the reason that I picked it up. You can of course still use a Backbone One when you're out and about, but in those moments I've never really enjoyed the idea of locking up my phone for gaming when I might need it for a WhatsApp or a phone call, and switching between apps is just not very fun. The Backbone One does support pass-through charging, so you can keep your phone topped up, but if you're just relying on your phone's battery out and about, it's going to take a hit pretty quickly if you are gaming on something intensive. The other thing is that if you've got an iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max, you're actually going to have to take it out of its case in order to be able to put it into the Backbone One, and that just doesn't feel like something I want to do when I'm out and about. The iPhone screen is actually amazing for some games because it's got beautiful colours and it's just really crisp and clear, but obviously if you try to play something like God of War on it, it's not going to be that great. Actually, the game that I've enjoyed the most playing on my phone has been Celeste, which is a 2D platformer. It's a game that I prefer playing on a handheld device rather than my TV, and so being able to play it on my phone, it's actually allowed me to complete the main story, which is a rare thing these days. Switching between all these different apps could get a bit annoying, which is why Backbone has its own app, which serves as a launchpad for all your different services. In terms of a hub for your games, it works really well and it's easy to navigate. But something that I'm not too keen on is Backbone's subscription model, which locks away some features for people who are willing to pay a premium each year. When you buy your Backbone, you'll get a year's worth of this subscription for free, but after that it's about £39.99 to renew and keep access to those features. And when you actually add that onto your PlayStation Plus subscription, your Game Pass Ultimate subscription, you're going to reach a pretty large amount that you're outlaying every month just to be able to play games on the go. And what's worse with the Backbone app is that the features don't seem particularly compelling either. You get access to Discord Nitro and it allows you to stream your games to Twitch, but they feel like use cases that are more aimed at content creators than general users, and I'm not sure how many people are actually running Twitch channels from their mobile phone. I could be wrong. Backbone One is a pricey product to begin with. It's £99 just for the controller, which is already half of what a Switch Lite costs in the UK and almost a third of a Steam Deck. Throw in a subscription that actually costs twice as much as Nintendo Online per year, and you've got a really pricey handheld, can only really stream games from different services. That's where it actually becomes really difficult to recommend the Backbone to most people. I think if you're in an edge case where you don't have an iPad, you really struggle to get access to a TV to complete your PlayStation or Xbox games, then by all means pick up a Backbone One controller and you'll actually have a great experience using it if you don't mind paying that amount of money.
The GameSir G8 Galileo brings full-fat controller gaming to your phone, but does it do enough to compete with a genuine handheld for a spot in your bag? Let's find out. These days, there are quite a few stereoscopic controllers that can attach to your phone and enhance its gaming experience. The big difference with the G8 Galileo is that it comes in a more traditional gamepad form factor. This affords it more space for larger buttons and longer grips that make it a much more comfortable experience than something like the Backbone One. There are even magnetic faceplates that will allow you to customize the look of this controller, although I don't think any have been released as of this video being recorded. But even better, they snap off to reveal removable Hall effect joysticks, and you've got a few alternative options that come inside the box. While I'm not necessarily a fan of this inverted Nintendo Switch style joystick layout, it is really nice to see them slightly off access to the D-pad and the gamepad buttons, which means you can swivel your thumb to move between different sections of the controller. The gamepad buttons themselves are sufficiently clicky and spacious enough, but you might not be as impressed with the D-pad, which is incredibly clicky to say the least, and while it is quite accurate, it's also very noisy. The triggers are also a good experience on this controller, and you can switch them over to a hair trigger mode. Where this controller really shines in terms of build quality though is how it's going to connect to your phone and above all protect it. The inner edge of the controller is lined with this serrated rubber guard, and that lining runs across the entire backplate too. You'll also find a male USB-C connection which is on a kind of lever, so you can actually flex it around and find the right spot for your phone. Unfortunately, the G8 Galileo does only come with a USB-C option, which means you'll have to have an iPhone 15 or later if you're not an Android user. And there is another feature which is only available to Android users, that being the two programmable back paddles on the rear side of the device, which can be mapped to different button combos using an Android phone, but unfortunately there's no app to do this for the iPhone. Another thing to note is that if you are using a case with your phone, it's going to be a very snug fit next to that USB-C port. GameSir recommends using a case that is less than 1mm width, and I personally found using a clear case that I did have to squeeze the controller together in order to ensure a good connection. There is also a USB-C pass-through to charge your phone while you're playing it, and a headphone jack, which is always great to see. To give you an idea of just how portable this controller is though, I recently took it with me on a trip to Vienna with my family, and I was able to get through a bit of Minecraft on the plane with my son lay across me and his head resting on my arm. It might not be as portable as the Backbone One, but it's definitely robust enough to sling into a bag you've already got full with other stuff and just whip it out whenever you fancy a bit of a gaming sesh. Just like the Backbone One though, the true gaming experience is going to depend entirely on the phone that you're using. Does it have a good enough battery life or performance to sustain the games you want to play? And are they even available on your phone in the first place? The games I've mostly been reaching for on my iPhone 15 Pro Max are either cozy games or ones that I can pick up and play, dive into and just kind of drop at a moment's notice. That's because I personally find it difficult to focus on gaming when I'm playing through a phone, and it's not just about getting things like notifications from messages, it's also the fact that my phone will tend to auto dim the screen if I'm playing in certain conditions, and that's not always great for a consistent gameplay experience. That said, even though I'm the worst Minecraft player in existence, I have really enjoyed playing with it on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and it really does look beautiful on this display. It's such a shame that when you are playing games on the PlayStation Remote Play app, The aspect ratio of the iPhone means that this screen is really not used to its full potential. While the iPhone screen might look quite similar in size to the PlayStation Portal, the cropping that you experience on the PlayStation Remote Play app just means that it's much smaller in practice. And despite the fact I notice much more disruption to my stream when I am playing through a phone, because of the form factor of this controller, you are able to get through some quite sticky situations on games like God of War, and it is a really enjoyable experience gaming on this controller. It's also a much less expensive option than the PlayStation Portal or even the Backbone One. And most of the bugbears I have with this controller actually relate to the iPhone's limitations in terms of gaming. If you've been charting the rise of smartphone controllers over the past year or so, the EasySMX M15 may look pretty familiar. But in terms of how it plays, it actually offers a very different experience even to its closer rivals. This particular controller was sent out to me by EasySMX, but don't worry, I won't be going easy on them. I really shouldn't crack jokes in these videos. The aim of these stereoscopic controllers is to give you a more console-like experience when you're playing on a mobile device. All you have to do is slide your phone into the USB-C connector, snap it shut, and you've got a very powerful little handheld gaming device. There's a lot of variation in this category, but the thing that really sets the M15 apart from something like the Backbone One is that it's a bit chunkier and it sits in your hands rather like an Xbox One controller. The real game changer though with the M15 is that they've introduced mechanical switches to the buttons. Both the D-pad and the triggers have tactile switches, while the face buttons have micro switches underneath them, which feel and sound really satisfying to press. Whether you like this is completely a matter of taste. I personally am a big fan of those face buttons. It can just feel really nice to have that little audio feedback as you are gaming with the A, B, X, Y buttons. I am actually split on the D-pad. I think it's probably the weakest element of this controller. Although it's been responsive enough in all the tests I've put it through, I'm not a huge fan of the rounded edges and general form factor. The triggers on the other hand do feel very nice. Their Hall effect along with the joysticks, which is pretty standard to be honest in most controllers these days, and they also have a rapid trigger mode if that's something you want to switch over to. Here again, there is attention to detail in how the triggers sound. They're not going to clang against the controller when you release them, and I really appreciate that. The joysticks are definitely on the smaller side, but there's adequate grip thanks to the lip around the edge. That slighter profile also helps in terms of button placement as well. You're not going to feel too cramped on this controller, and there's a lot of room to move between the different sections of the controller. EasySMX have done a great job in terms of weight distribution and general comfort as well. The handles have a nice contour to them as well as some etching in the plastic for added grip, which is going to sit very nicely in your hand and have your kind of middle fingers directly on the back paddles, which can be customized for various actions. One thing that disappoints me about all of these controllers is that you'll most likely have to take your phone out of its case in order to insert it into the controller itself. There's a ridge alongside the inside of the controller which prevents damaging the sides of your phone when its kind of pincer grip snaps together, but that means that the USB connector is slightly depressed and can only just fit into the phone itself. For that reason though, I do appreciate that controllers like the EasySMX have a larger backplate which does protect the phone and the camera lenses from being scratched or picking up knocks. I mentioned that this controller may look very familiar to people who've been following the space, and there is of course one rival that is very familiar indeed, that is the GameSir G8 Galileo. If you look very closely at things like that USB-C connector and some of the ridging around the insides of the controller, you do get the impression that some of these parts may even come from the same factories. But after closer inspection, you do see the differences between these two controllers. For one thing, the G8 Galileo is a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, and has a slightly more controller-like feel. If you've got bigger hands, you're probably going to find more comfort with the G8 Galileo because it will just allow your bottom fingers to kind of rest on the back of the controller with a bit more ease. You also get quite a few more features than the EasySMX M15 offers. For example, it comes with a headphone jack.
swappable thumbsticks, and a swappable faceplate. Although so far I haven't seen GameSir actually release any of these faceplates, so it's definitely not a game changer. The other big difference is really the feel of those buttons. For me, I much prefer the D-pad on the G8 Galileo, but when it comes to the triggers and the face buttons, the EasySMX M15 is much more to my taste. I really do love that mechanical switch style. But honestly, the difference in price is a deciding factor here, and the EasySMX version is going to be going at around £48 here in the UK, whereas the G8 Galileo is around £78. So you're almost paying double the price for some of these customization options. The cool thing is that both of these are much more comfortable and affordable options than something like the Backbone 1 controller, which to be fair was a pioneer in this space, but a couple of years later feels like a much less comfortable and overpriced version of the stereoscopic format. It also comes with an unnecessary app subscription, which adds more cost unnecessarily onto the device. I actually sold my Backbone 1 controller after upgrading to a USB-C iPhone, and I don't feel compelled to buy another one, especially with controllers like the M15 and the G8 Galileo on sale. It's not just the hardware experience that's getting a lot better with mobile gaming, but actually as phones get more powerful and restrictions on app stores get lifted, they're becoming very capable gaming devices. You can do all the usual things like access games through Apple Arcade or the Google Play Store, but the real innovation in this space has definitely been the addition of RetroArch and Delta to the iPhone's experience, which means that you can now tap into some of your ROMs. If you want to tap into your retro game library, play a bit of Pokemon or maybe some PSP, then this can now be a really cool option to have with you on the go. The remote play experience on PlayStation is something that's really improved recently. The release of the PlayStation Portal, I think, has had a net benefit for everybody in this ecosystem because it's really given them an added incentive to make that remote play feature work as smoothly as possible, and I've definitely felt it when playing on my phone as well. This is a great option to have in your bag or on your bedside table and just get through a game of FIFA before you go to sleep. And I'm sorry, but I can't change 30 odd years of calling it FIFA. Streaming games on the PlayStation Portal is of course a really bespoke and high quality experience that you're not necessarily going to get out of a phone, but there are some advantages to it. For example, you can use Bluetooth, which is a lot better than Sony's Link option, and that range of systems you're able to access on your phone can make it a really versatile gaming machine. Ultimately though, there are some limitations with smartphone gaming as well. For example, the displays aren't really designed for the kind of aspect ratios you would get on games. Unless you're playing something that's been specifically designed for mobile devices, you're going to get a pretty harsh crop, and it can be quite hard to stare at this tiny screen over a long period of time. If you're an iPhone user, it could also be pretty frustrating how long it's taken Apple to roll out just a handful of AAA titles onto the App Store. And even if something like Assassin's Creed Mirage is a fully fledged game on the iPhone, I don't want to pay £40 odd for it when I could just get it on a console for the same price. The other thing with these controllers is just practicality, because while it's great to have a controller like this in a pinch, it's also really difficult to put your phone aside and relinquish the other things that you use it for. If you need to guarantee that you are always available, for example if you have kids, then it's really not great to lock your phone into a gaming mode when you kind of need to react to calls if they come through. And even just messing with the settings to, adjust the brightness or volume can be a bit of a faff when using a controller like this. In general though, £40 odd for a really well built controller that's going to give you a lovely gaming experience when you're out and about, I think it's a really good deal, and it's definitely an amazing option to have if you feel like you're going to get stuck somewhere throughout the day. Just lash this in your bag, you'll be sound. There are so many smartphone controllers out there these days, but at least there is now one clear recommendation. Just get the GameSir G8 Plus. The predecessor to this model was already my favourite in the category. The GameSir G8 Galileo just felt like a regular gamepad controller, and it really was the most comfortable option you had to play games on your smartphone. So let's take a quick look at both of these controllers and ask why it's such a big improvement.
On the face of it, not too much has changed. Both of these controllers retain that wonderfully comfortable gamepad form factor and all of the modern features you'd associate with controllers released these days. A nice clicky D-pad with very satisfying face buttons, which can be remapped along with the 2 additional back buttons you get on the rear of the controller, and Hall effect triggers and joysticks, which are going to be less prone to drift over time. You can get a range of options if you want to swap out the thumbsticks, and it's incredibly easy to do with these magnetic face plates that simply snap off the controller and allow you access to the buttons underneath. These controllers are exactly the same form factor, so you can actually mix and match faceplates if you have both controllers to hand, but it would be great to see some custom designs come out in the future. Now, looking under the hood like this is where you see some of the big differences start to emerge between the G8 Plus and the G8 Galileo, because on the G8 Plus you can now also swap those face buttons, or at least reorder them to best fit the system that you want to play on. As a default, this is going to come with the Xbox 360 style layout. Because I'm mostly going to be using this for the Nintendo Switch, I've rearranged it into the Switch layout. And really, this is the huge upgrade for this controller, because you're no longer relying on a USB-C connection into your smartphone. This is actually going to connect to a wide range of devices using Bluetooth. It also opens about an inch further than the G8 Galileo, which means this really is a perfect choice for lots of different phones, tablets, and the Nintendo Switch. Because this is now a Bluetooth controller, it will have a 1000 mAh battery inside, which adds a bit of weight. I actually think that makes it feel a little bit more premium, but of course you will also have to keep it charged, so it does come with a cable. It also adds a gyroscope and rumble features to the controller. These upgrades do come with some slight drawbacks. For example, because of that USB-C port at the base of the G8 Plus, there's now no room for a headphone jack. So if you really do like playing with a wired headphone connection, then the G8 Galileo is still the option to go for. And of course, opinions on the colour options may vary. But enough of that, let's take a look at some actual systems you can use this for. Even on a smartphone device, whether that's Android or iPhone, losing that USB-C port is actually a big upgrade, because it means you don't have to take your phone out of the case in order to insert it into the controller. This always felt like a big inconvenience to me, because I didn't want to risk taking my phone out of its case and then either losing the case or damaging the phone. So knowing that it's kept nice and protected in that case while enclosed in the G8 Plus itself is a big win. Just for size comparison, here is the Nothing Phone 2A, and you'll see that despite being a very slim and light phone, it still feels very safe and secure inside of this controller. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which fits really well in this controller too, and that huge camera bump is not going to impact the way it's positioned within the controller. To up the screen size even further, this now works beautifully on something like an iPad mini or any other tablet you have your hands on. And if you want to hear more about this, make sure to subscribe, because I've got some iPad mini reviews coming up, and the GameSir G8 Plus will absolutely feature. Really though, the big win for this controller is going to be how it works with the Nintendo Switch. 7 or 8 years later, Nintendo still haven't done much to address the issue of stick drift in the Joy-Cons, and I'm currently on my 3rd version of them, so you know, switching to something like the G8 Plus just feels like a much better long-term option. Being relatively heavy-handed, the G8 Plus is also a lot more comfortable for me to grip over a long period of time, and the fact that I can now switch those buttons around to match the Nintendo Switch layout just makes this a really great option. It's actually a lot more comfortable than something like the cracked Nitro Deck Plus, and still retains a lot of the customization options that you would get in that controller. The one big difference is that you could get the Nitro Deck Plus and also use it as a dock, whereas for the GameSir G8 Plus, you're going to have to take it out of the controller every time you actually want to dock it. But the fact that you can just take one game controller with you and have it work on a range of different systems you've got, even just connect it Bluetooth to a docked position and play on the couch, it just makes it such a great controller. GameSir do state on their website that this can connect to a PC, and although I could find a Bluetooth connection with my Legion Go, it just wouldn't actually connect properly. It is entirely possible to connect to the Legion Go with a cable, but then you have the issue of how well it actually fits in the G8 Plus itself. The Legion Go is a pretty thick console, and in fact it barely fits within the width of the controller. You can actually see the back plate of the controller like bending to try and fit the Legion Go within its claws, and it is prone to kind of pop out every now and again if you're not careful. Also, that backplate does block the ventilation of the Legion Go, which probably isn't a good idea. And so yeah, if you're thinking about getting a more comfortable controller for the Legion Go, then yeah, this isn't it. That said, the sheer versatility and performance of this controller across a wide range of devices means that it's just a perfect controller to have on you. I can absolutely see myself going on a weekend away, taking my Nintendo Switch with me, and then having the option to use one controller for both the Switch and my iPad if I want to do something like remote play at home. With every new mobile gaming controller that hits the market, premium features are starting to trickle down into the more budget-friendly options. That's exactly the case with the EasySMX M15, which now comes with a Bluetooth version. When I reviewed the USB-C version of this controller, I said that it was the best budget-friendly mobile gamepad out there. So the fact that the colour and connectivity aside, nothing else has changed on this controller, including the price, this is now a really great candidate to actually take that mantle. EasySMX did send me out this version of the M15, but I'm not getting any financial incentive to make this video, just a link in the description that will save you 15% on your purchase. But let's take a look at the features and exactly why this is such a good budget option. The trade-off with Bluetooth rather than USB-C is, of course, you're going to have a lower latency, and that can be important for certain kinds of gamers. But if you are a casual gamer who wants to use this controller on a range of devices, then the Bluetooth option is the way to go. Not only can you now use this controller with an iOS or Android phone, you can now use it with your Nintendo Switch, or even connect it to your PS4 and use it to game on the couch. Being a Bluetooth controller, it has a 400 mAh battery, which you can keep charged via pass-through. The grips themselves are very comfortable and easy to hold in your palm. They're also laser etched with a little surface, which makes them harder to slip out of your hands. Much needed, because the M15 has 6 levels of adjustable vibration, although that only kicks in when you're streaming from something like Game Pass Ultimate. One thing that sets the M15 apart though is that it has tactile mechanical buttons. These are real physical switches in the D-pad and the triggers, and for the face buttons you're actually getting micro switches which have a completely different feel to the D-pad, but all in all it's very satisfying to game with, and it also has quite a low audio profile, so you can game very quietly. There are those 2 mappable back buttons, and of course you're getting a Hall effect joystick and triggers which are capable of rapid trigger mode. All in all, that's a pretty stacked controller for this price point, and to add the fact that it's really comfortable to use over a long period of time, then I think it's really worth checking out. The Switch actually fits in very securely. You can wobble this around quite a lot and that Switch is not going to fall out. The fact that you're no longer relying on that USB connection either means that you can have a pretty thick phone case and your phone is still going to fit here very well too. One thing that I really appreciate about this is the fact that when you actually slide out that back plate, it gives you the button combos you'll need to set up with different devices right there in front of you. So you don't have to remember loads of combos or constantly reference the guidebook. All you have to do is hold Function and A for 2 seconds and you can connect to your Switch. Really, the big question is, what are you missing compared to a more expensive controller like the GameSir Plus? That controller has swappable thumbsticks and faceplates, which means you can really customize the controller how you like, although I'm still yet to see any secondary faceplates that have actually been released for it. There's no headphone jack on either of these controllers, so that's also worth knowing. But the big thing holding the M15 back is the fact that it only stretches to a max of 176mm. That means it's not stretching wide enough to get an iPad mini, and when you do eventually upgrade to a Switch 2, that's probably going to be too wide for it as well. That's not something I'm worried about when it comes to the G8 Plus, for example. All in all though, the M15 is well worth the price, and I think it's a great gift for anybody who primarily games on their phone or has a Nintendo Switch that's maybe suffering from a bit of Joy-Con drift. But if you do want to check out some other similar controllers which might give you a bit more flexibility, then check out this video next. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in a bit. As soon as you unbox the ELO Vagabond, you know that you've got something special on your hands. But can it really live up to its billing as the ultimate mobile controller? Let's find out. This video is being sponsored by Vagabond, but all thoughts are my own. You only have to blink and there's a brand new mobile gaming controller on the market, but very few are as premium and polished as the ELO Vagabond. ELO has its roots in competitive gaming, and they've tried to build this controller as a precision instrument that's going to get you the very best performance. Like many controllers that's come before it, the Vagabond connects to your mobile device with a USB-C. But this controller comes with one of the smoothest and widest sliding mechanisms that I've come across. Inside the box you'll get a range of rubber adapters, so whether you've got a bulky case on your phone or are using a slightly larger device like a tablet, you'll be able to find the perfect fit. The adapters can be a little bit tricky to wedge into the controller itself, but once you've got them in there, they fit very snugly and are incredibly stable. For that reason, this controller is suited to someone who's going to use the same device consistently rather than wanting to swap between different sized devices. And for me, that became the iPad mini, at which this controller absolutely excels. There's no need for a battery on this controller because it's going to draw power at a very low rate from your device, but that just means it can be incredibly lightweight. That's just one reason this is the most comfortable mobile gaming controller that I've ever used. The Vagabond keeps an extremely slight profile, and the grips extend just far enough that you can hold the controller really comfortable without it ever feeling bulky. This in turn creates quite a big gap between your hands and the device itself, which makes it feel even more spacious. It reminds me very much of using the PlayStation Portal in that regard. The cherry on top of this controller though is those rubberized grips, which extend from the back of the controller almost to the face buttons. You do have to watch out though, because I've been using this controller for just about a month, and rattling around in my bag it's definitely picked up quite a few scratches on the front and back of the plastic. If you play guitar like me and have calluses on your thumbs, then you should also know that the way that the thumbsticks are built has actually scratched off quite a bit of dead skin from my fingertips, and so that's the kind of dust that you're seeing on there. That's something that I can probably clean off, but I wanted to show it in this video. On the underside of the Vagabond you will find a headphone jack and a USB-C port used for pass-through charging. It's impressive just how many features this controller packs in to what is a very sleek design. But does it feel just as spacious when you're actually gaming? The short answer is yes. While the face buttons can be a little bit rattly, they are built with mechanical switches and they feel just brilliant to game on. They also have a very nice and quiet audio profile, which does feel very nice if you're gaming in a quiet environment too. The D-pad is very firm, but that's my personal preference on controllers like this, especially for 2D platformers like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where you definitely always feel you're going in the right direction, even though you might not be able to tell from how bad I am at this game. On the rear of the controller, you've got two mappable back buttons, which you can freeze in place with two hardware locks. This is a really useful feature if you don't always want to use those back buttons and are afraid of mispresses in certain games. Just simply slide those buttons over and you won't have to worry about it at all. We also have Hall effect triggers and joysticks, which can be calibrated in the Unleashed app, which is also where you can set the lighting levels of those rings around the joysticks. So let's take a bit of a closer look at the Unleashed app itself. I've criticised other companies in the past for making these game launchers a paid-for subscription, but that's not the case with ELO. It's simply free and it comes with the controller. It's not going to pull in every game that you've got on your device. It's more like a curated selection of games that ELO think you might be interested in. But one cool thing is you can always just hold on to that ELO button on the controller and it will just bring up your Apple Games library if you're playing on an iOS device. The real thing you will want to download the Unleashed app for though is to make sure that you can get firmware updates. These don't take too long at all to install, and it's definitely worth doing to make sure you're ironing out any bugs when you first pick the controller up. Actually, having updated the controller once, it did change the calibration of my joysticks, so for a moment I thought I was getting some stick drift. I went into the app, recalibrated everything, and it was running perfectly again. In here you can also remap buttons. I do things like change the audio levels of the Unleashed app if you want to just switch off the music. But really all of this is just a nice bonus to what is already the best mobile gaming controller that I've personally used.
Of course, there are other controllers that use Bluetooth and can be swapped around devices a lot more easily, but honestly this is the first time I've used a controller with my iPad mini and felt that it can really compete with the likes of the PlayStation Portal. If you're using an iPad or Android device, it's still going to have its own software limitations that continue to get in the way. I mean, it can't really compete with the likes of a Steam Deck or a Legion Go. But in terms of the hardware, it makes it feel like a true gaming device. On a recent trip to France, I elected to just take this controller and my iPad mini with no other gaming option, and it gave me a very discreet yet powerful way of playing games while I was abroad. The exciting thing that this is a debut product, but ELO seem like they want to listen to as much community feedback as possible to improve this product as best they can through firmware updates, and to inform future product decisions as well. They've also managed to keep the controller at $99, which is actually a decent price compared to some of the competitors. If you want to learn more about the ELO Vagabond, then check out the link in my description, and I've also got these videos which could interest you in the meantime. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.